UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's announcements on climate change policy are a slow-motion car crash. These are the words of the Conservative MP that recently prepared an independent report on net zero for the government. What Sunak is saying just doesn't add up. I don't think there's any economic basis for this action, and I'm left with the view that the motivation for this has to be political. Even if his analysis is correct, he's making short-term compromises which worsen the problems in the long term. This is odd given that in his big speech he said, "Too often motivated by short-term thinking, politicians have taken the easy way out." So he's suggesting that he's not motivated by short-term thinking. I think this describes exactly what he's doing. I'm going to tell you why. Of course, it's a really good idea to keep all policies under review and to change course if something is wrong. Sunak said this is a more pragmatic approach which will ease the burden on working people. It makes sense to ask the question whether working people might be facing increased costs associated with environmental measures and that this is having a disproportionate effect during the cost of living crisis. So he made three main announcements. First, he postponed the ban on sale of new petrol and diesel cars from 2030 to 2035. Second, he's giving more time for people to make the transition from gas boilers to heat pumps. And third, he's dropping plans to fine landlords who don't upgrade rental properties to a certain level of energy efficiency. In terms of the first two items, no one is facing forced increased costs at the moment. These are both measures that are only going to increase costs over the medium to long term. Thus, they have no impact at all on the current cost of living crisis for working people, and they won't do for a while. For the third item, the current policy is having a more immediate effect, and there is an argument that increasing the cost for landlords will result in higher rents for working people. However, the UK has a lot of badly insulated housing, requiring landlords to improve energy efficiency in their rental properties could provide significant savings on a tenant's heating bills. I really don't think that Sunak's new approach will ease any burden on working people. Even if he's right that there are some short-term cost saving from these measures, his approach is based on a very static analysis. He's not taking into account that those who do transition to electric cars and heat pumps will make significant savings that more than outweigh any initial costs. And postponing these changes leaves people exposed to future oil and gas prices, both in motoring and in heating homes. It's the equivalent of postponing all surgery in the NHS for 1 month because this will save a lot of money. Very short-term thinking. There are additional effects of watering down his government's climate change policies that he also fails to take into account. It's very easy to say that the UK only accounts for 1% of global emissions and question why we should sacrifice more than others. The UK was taking a leadership role on global climate issues. Such a high-profile switch in policies could have a dramatic effect on everyone else's behaviour. Our leadership role was exactly why it's right we do sacrifice more than others, at least initially. There's also a more immediate impact. The delay means that air pollution in the UK will continue for longer. This has a direct impact on people's health. This isn't just me saying this. On the government's website, Public Health England says, poor air quality is the largest environmental risk to public health in the UK. And it talks about long-term exposure to air pollution causing chronic conditions such as cardiovascular, respiratory disease, lung cancer, and leading to reduced life expectancy. Putting it simply, more people will die as a result of this watering down of policy. And the cost to the NHS of avoidable diseases also needs to be taken into account. Some people might think that air pollution isn't too bad in the UK. Here's DEFRA's information on air pollution. For particulate matter, the unsafe level specified by the WHO is 5. As you can see, a massive proportion of England in 2021 was in the 6 to 8 range. Also, it's hard to see, but there are spots of the lighter green and yellow, meaning that the level is between 6 and 13, in some cases more than double the safe level. Of course, it may appear that there's only small areas where the pollution level is that high, but these are in highly built-up areas where many people live, so the proportion of the population affected is much higher than may be implied by a map like this. The colour coding on this map isn't very helpful. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I do wonder if this might have been deliberate to downplay these persistent problems. If they made it go more red the higher the air pollution, the problem areas would be much more apparent. For nitrogen dioxide, the safe level determined by the WHO is 10. Again, the colours don't seem to be very helpful. They don't really match those in the map. However, it's clear that there are areas of turquoise and green, clearly indicating that nitrogen dioxide levels are 3 to 4 times higher than the safe level. Even if Sunak's announcement will save some people a bit of money in the coming years, I don't think this is worth allowing this unacceptable state of the UK's air to continue. But when you take into account that it's not even clear that it will save people money, it's hard to comprehend why any government would do this. There's another negative effect of Sunak's announcements, in addition to this impact on individuals. Business doesn't like it. This isn't surprising. I mentioned the Conservative MP, Chris Skidmore, that was commissioned by the government to undertake an independent review of net zero. His report was published earlier this year. Let's take a quick look at some of his conclusions. He makes it clear that net zero is a big opportunity, but that we must move quickly or the UK will lose out to other countries. He also makes the point that, beyond the short term, investing in net zero today will be cheaper, and that the quicker we move, the quicker we'll capitalise on economies of scale that come from scaling up. He also pointed out the positive impact on innovation and investment. The car industry has been particularly vocal about the UK flip-flopping on the previous commitments it had made. Sunak made the point that the UK is now merely aligning with all the major countries of the world. But this is precisely the problem. The UK's bold approach in leading the way was starting to give UK industry an advantage. So, why would Sunak do this when the economics of it are so flawed? I think the answer is very clear. It's purely political. The fact that the Tories were able to hang on to the Uxbridge seat in the recent by-election has convinced the government that there is a popular backlash against environmental policies. The ultra-low emission zone charges that have recently been introduced in Outer London are potentially a really divisive issue like Brexit. And I think that Sunak feels that he can use this to improve his chances of staying in power. It's as simple as that. From an economic perspective, I think the issues are clear. We need to change dramatically, and it can't come quickly enough. To delay previously agreed policies is just crazy. To make these announcements in the hope of making short-term political gains is unforgivable. If Sunak really cared about working people and making brave decisions, even if there's a political cost, he would stay firm on one of the few policy areas where the UK could be said to have been leading the world. Very sad. I hope you found this information useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd really appreciate that. Thanks for watching. See you next time.